Hello friends, I welcome you into this lecture. In this lecture, I am going to discuss the various drawbacks in the planning system of India and the Niti Aayog, the comparison of Planning Commission and the Niti Aayog and so on. So I will be discussing the achievements of the planning system in India. What are the mistakes that were done by the planners? What were the problems with the Planning Commission? What were the different issues and the debates in the Indian planning system? What are the adverse implications of poor planning, Niti Aayog and the Niti Aayog versus the Planning Commission? So listen to this lecture very carefully. Have at least 30 to 40 minutes for completely absorbing this lecture. Don't distract yourself. Switch off your mobile or keep it on an aeroplane mode. If you are watching the lecture on the mobile, then you can open the Wi-Fi and switch off aeroplane. Keep your phone on the aeroplane. So take the maximum advantage from this lecture by removing all the distractions, because if you are sitting in the offline lecture, then definitely you have no distraction. But when you are sitting in front of the online lecture, then you have lots of distractions. So if you have distractions, then you can't absorb what I'm saying. Then you might feel that you are missing something. So have a focus and focus on this lecture, right? We'll also be discussing some questions. So the questions that can come from this lecture is, first question is, planning system in India has not been a complete failure. Comment. So here we have to show some of the positive things of the Indian planning system. Then also identify the major mistakes done by our planners and the various issues in the planning system in India. So what are the various mistakes that were done by our planners and what are the various issues in the planning system of India? So I am giving you 15 seconds to think about this topic. So write a few points in your answer sheet, in your answer sheet in the 15 seconds, or you just think that what are the different issues that were there in the planning system. Then we will see. Okay, so now the next question is, normally countries shifted from agriculture to industry and later to services, but India shifted from agriculture to services directly. So this is the starting point. What are the reason for the huge growth of the services versus the industry in the country? Can India become a developed country without a strong industrial base? So this is the question here, right? So this is a very conceptual question, and this was asked in the General Studies paper 3 in 2014. And this such type of question can be asked, the Planning Commission can be asked anytime in the examination. So when I'm giving you the question, why I'm giving the question in the starting? Because when you have the questions in your front, you can actually think from that perspective that what are the possible questions that can be made from this question. And definitely this is not the exhaustive list of the questions. Rather, this is the indicative list of questions. There are many more possible questions you can find at different places. But if you have this content, you can answer any question. Slowly, after a few lectures, we will discuss some questions and answers. Then in every lecture, we will discuss at least 2 question and answer. I'll be giving you two answers to write, and after you complete this lecture, I will request you, so please write these answers into your copy and send it to me, right? So in this way, you will develop your answer writing also, because every General Studies paper has a different answer writing pattern. You need to be having different kind of terminology. You need to have different kind of approach for the different General Studies paper. So for the General Studies paper 3, I will be telling you what are the basic foundation of the answer writing. So don't worry friends, I am with you, either whether you are appearing in 2019 or 2020. Every bit of my lecture is going to add an extra mark to your examination, right? So now let us start from this basic fact. So this fact shows that Annual GDP growth rate between 1951 to 1965 has been 4.1%. In the next, from 1965 to 1981, this is 3.2%. Then in the next 10 years, 5.6%. And then it has been around again 5.4%. And in 2003 2012, it has been more than 8%. So we can see from the initial 15 years to the last, between 2003 to 2012, it is a one decade. There is a doubling the size of the growth rate. So we can see that the growth rate has been doubled in the span of this more than 40 years time, right? So there are a lot of achievements. We can see this is possible only because of the planning commission strategy. So it is not that planning commission has failed. So now let us see the achievements of the planning commission. So can you remember some achievements? I am giving you 5 seconds. Just think what are the achievements of the planning system. So the discussion that we had in the previous 2 lecture, you can take few points from there and you can interlink here. So write just write 5-6 achievements of the planning system so that you can have the stimulation of your mind. Okay, so let us come back. So the first achievement, so how to think. I'm telling you how to think. Should we just recollect the fact, or there is a specific method to recollect the points in the examination hall? So when you are thinking, just think that what are the different sectors of economy. So the first sector is agriculture, right? And in the agriculture, what is the major achievement? The green revolution. And because of the green revolution, buffer stock are there, and we are very much we have various prosperous regions like Western UP, Haryana, Punjab. So this is one of the achievement. Then as we discussed in the second 5-year plan, in the industry. So first point is regarding the agriculture, second point is regarding the industry. So in the industry, we can see that in the second 5-year plan, we started focusing upon the basic and the heavy industries, right? So these basic and heavy industries are also very good in India. We have good power sector, we have good steel sector, we have good cement sector, and so on. So this is also one of the achievement. Then as we have just seen that our growth rate has almost doubled from the starting decade and until the recent decade. So growth rate is also doubled. Then the service sector is also doing good, right? We have very good service sector in the form of banking sector, in the form of IT sector, in the form of telecom sector. So our service sector is also doing very, very good. Then we have very good private sector also. So we say that at the time of independence, we were not having the good private sector. That is why we have to give the commanding heights to the PSU. But now we have very good private sector. We have big corporates. So this corporate culture is evolving into India. And as far as PSUs are concerned, we also have very strong public sector undertakings. We have the PSUs like ONGC, Indian Oil Corporation, NTPC, and these PSUs are working globally. They are earning the name, fame, and money from the government of India. So these are the achievements: the green evolution, the good heavy and basic industries, improved per capita income, thriving service sector, fastest growing economy, vibrant private sector, and the global PSUs. So, and apart from this, there are a lot of achievements. And when we are writing the answer to any question, we should focus upon the core points, right? We should focus upon the core point. I am saying there are hundreds of achievements, but we can't write all the achievement in the answer. We need to have 5-6 points for every point. So I am giving you these 5-7 points, and these are the most important points. These are the achievement of the planning system. So if you have written something else in your notebook as the achievement of the planning commission, that is also true. But these are the core things. These are the core achievements of India as a planned economy. Now, what are the mistakes that have been done by us, right? So the mistakes, again, we can trace back from our policies. So we had various policies. We have the policies like the policies of inward looking strategy. Because of this inward looking strategy, we said that whatever we can produce inside the country, we will not import. So this resulted into strict import licensing, and this resulted into the high tariff. So this resulted into the tariff system and the quota system. And because of this, there was almost no import except the capital goods. And also because there was no import, there was no export also, because we did not have the good manufacturing industry. So this resulted into the poor import and export, poor interlinking with the other countries. At the same time, this also resulted into the poor foreign investment from the outside India. So we didn't have the sufficient capital to come from outside India. So that was also one of the drawback of this policy, right? So highly protectionist trade and foreign investment policies, and this resulted into the strict import licensing, ultra high tariff beginning amid 1980s, near prohibition of foreign investment from early 1970s. So these mistakes have been identified by the Niti Aayog. So please be careful that these are the very, very important points. I have not manufactured these points. I have taken these points directly from a Niti Aayog documents. So these are the very, very valid document, and you can mention this point in your answer, right? Now second was the policy of industrial control, right? So in this policy, as you remember, the second 5-year plan introduced the industrial policy 1956, and this industrial policy 1956 divided the role of the public sector and the private sector. It reserved certain industries into the small companies, so that there is a labor intensive growth and the small companies, the small enterprises can develop. So it actually evolved the socialistic pattern of society. It gave more important role to the public sector, so that there is socialism and there is taking care of the poor people, so that everyone in the society can get a economic justice. So this was the reason why the socialistic pattern of society was adopted, and the intention was good. But if we see from the economic point of view, from economic rational, somehow some of the areas that were best left to the private sector, they were monopolized by the public sector. So the public sector grew, but at the cost of private sector. This is the first reason why the private sector could not grow, and this is one of the fault of the policy. Then to ensure that we can provide the good employment, we reserved some of the labor intensive products, for example textile, for example leather, for example food processing, for example tourism, and so on. So these kind of industries we strictly reserved for the small enterprises, that is the small scale industries. And because these industries were reserved for the small scale industries, the big industries could not come into these areas. And textile is one of the strength of India, because we have the good resources, we have the good manpower for the textile, but this strength we could not convert into the result. We could not have good exports from the textile sector. The countries like Bangladesh, they became much more strong as compared to the India, because we kept the textile, leather, footwear, everything into the small scale industries. And when we opened up, when we deserved this area in the 1991, that it was too late. So this is the reason why these sectors could not grow further, right? And also there is one more implication of this, that when we have kept this sector exclusively for SSI, so the SSI don't have any competition, and when they don't have any competition, they don't have any incentive for the efficiency, and when they don't have the efficiency for the efficiency, then they are decreasing their productivity, and when their productivity is decreased, they are started making losses. Their product cost is very high. We can't export their products, and at the end they start getting closed down. And when the small scale industry is getting closed down, then definitely the jobs are again going. So the ultimate purpose of protecting the SSIs that so that they can provide the job is actually defeated by reserving the labor intensive product for them, right? And one of the very famous economists, he said that India had the Brahminical mindset, that India focused on the capital intensive sectors. It ignored the labor intensive sector, as compared to the China, which focused equally in the capital intensive as well as the labor intensive sector. India actually missed the labor intensive sector by keeping them into the small enterprises domain. Then, to plan private investment, we had strict investment licensing. So as I told, we adopted the imperative planning. This imperative planning said that the public sector, that is the government, the planning commission, will be planning everything in detail. How much production can take place in any industry, how much export can take place, how much investment can take place. And because of this strict investment licensing, the specification of product, quantity and location, the private sector could not develop. There was huge corruption, and some of the experts believe that only those people who had the close proximity with the ruling party, the ruling family, and you understand what I am saying, right? So those people who had the very close proximity with the ruling family of India, they got licenses very easily, and the small industries could not get it. And there is a best example. You can watch the Guru movie, which was released in 2006. The Guru movie rightly indicates how the Ambanis grew. So they had the close proximity with one of the very influential ruling family of India. So this is how this investment ceiling actually resulted into the lopsided and unequal development of the industrial sector. Then to curb monopoly profits, we had also controlled the price and distribution parameters. So the prices were also all controlled. The public sector undertakings like BSNL or other industries, they could not charge the price whatever they want. They had certain restrictions. Similarly, the distribution was also controlled, and because of that, we had very huge shortcomings of the basic consumer goods like car, scooter, cement, telephone. You ask your parents, they will tell you that they had to wait for years to get their car, their scooters, cement, telephones. This was not the easy thing. You could not get it easily. This is not like now that you offer on the MI site or Flipkart, Amazon, and you get by the evening. Your parents had to wait for years. So that was the result of too much control, right? Now, next is the factor market distortions. Factor means basically the factor of production, right? Factor of production. So what are the factors of production? Factors of production can be capital, the factors of production can be the land, it can be the labor, it can be the entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship thing, we have already seen that there was huge investment ceilings, there was huge restrictions on the other in terms of the price and distribution controls, and other factors like labor. In the labor also, there were rigid labor laws. Why we had the rigid labor laws? Because in India, we adopted the capitalism and the socialism model together. We had the mixed economy, and in the mixed economy, this element of capitalism was there, and this element was having one of the very important lacuna. This lacuna is that there are chances of exploitation of the labor class by the capitalist class, which was already happening in the capitalistic society. So to avoid that thing, we already had very rigid labor laws. We had very huge restrictions on the minimum wages, on the relocation things, on the lot of labor welfare policies. So any capitalist who is going to do the business, he is having various monetary and non-monetary restrictions. The purpose was to control the exploitation of laborer. The purpose was good, but experts say that in India, the social revolution preceded the economic progress. So in the Western societies, first the capitalism grew, first the growth took place, and in the process, when there was some exploitation, then the control were done. But in India, first we controlled the capitalists, first we had the huge restriction on the capitalists, and then we said that grow. And when you are clipping their wing, how can they grow? How can they develop? So these rigid labor laws actually result into the lopsided economic growth, lopsided industrial development. Our industry could not grow, right? Then regarding the land, so for ensuring the release of land for the public housing and the other public projects, the Urban Land Ceiling and the Regulation Act 1976 was introduced. In this, the ceilings were imposed on various things, various other regulations were introduced, and today the adverse consequence of this point is that there is very high land prices, and at the same time there is very high rent, and at the same time there are huge vacancy in the built houses. Means there are houses which are having huge space and they are lying vacant, because these laws are actually not favorable to the for the renting purpose. So this topic we will discuss in detail when we discuss the housing sector. I will tell you how this contradictory thing is happening, that on the other hand there are vacancy, on the other hand there is huge rent. I will discuss this point in detail. Then, as we discussed, that we had the bank nationalization in 1969, and through the bank nationalization we had the strict control over the banks. So this strict control to direct the allocation of credit to the public, to the agriculture sector, this resulted into the high cost of capital for the industrialist. This high cost of capitalist resulted into the high cost of production, and when there is a high cost of production, the demand for the goods decrease, and when the demand decreases, it results into the low production, and when the low production happens, it results into the jobs losses. And this is one of the reasons why our growth has been jobless growth. Our industry has not been that much successful, right? Then mistakes in the agriculture sector. In the agriculture sector, we had the strong control over the agricultural marketing. So since our farmers were not so much literate, they were also not that much aware what is happening in the market. So to avoid their exploitation, we established certain APMC mandis, so that the private middlemen cannot exploit. So we appointed some licensed middlemen, and they actually exploited the farmers. We kept them so that the exploitation of farmers do not take place, but the same people actually exploited the farmers by making the manipulation in the weighing system, by making the manipulation in the accounting system, by making the manipulation in the quality certification. So all these issues actually impacted the agriculture marketing, and when the farmers don't realize the good prices, then their income is also coming down. When their income is coming down, the agriculture sector cannot grow, because when farmers don't have the income, they can't invest into the agricultural infrastructure, right? So before Britishers, we had the middlemen in the form of jamindars, and now we have the middlemen in the form of these APMC middlemen. Then we gave the tenants ownership rights as part of the land, as part of the land reforms. So this is the good thing, but at the same time we give the ownership rights to them, but their land size was very, very low. Because their land size was very, very low, so they could not actually grow their produce in a productive manner. So this was the negative point of this. Unintended consequences of fiscal constraint. So collapse of public investment in the face of rising subsidies. So as I told you that from the 1975 onwards, we followed the direct attack on poverty, from where we give various welfare schemes, subsidies to the people. When we give the subsidy, then definitely the amount in the government exchequer will come down. When we don't have the sufficient amount, we can't invest into the projects, the infrastructure projects, physical infrastructure, social infrastructure. So this giving more subsidy to the people actually resulted into the lower investment into the agriculture sector. So this had the adverse consequence. As per one of the report, out of the 100 rupees that go to the agriculture sector, 20 rupees actually go to the investment and 80 rupees go to the subsidies. So this is the problem. And even the latest government like Modi government, they are introducing the subsidy schemes like Pradhan Mantri Kisan Yojana. So there are definitely some good things, but overall it does not help in the long term. If you don't improve the productivity of the agriculture, it is not going to help in the long term. So these are the mistakes that we did, right? So let us again repeat, because these two slides are going to be very, very important in your answer writing. When you are writing the answer of FDI, you can mention that because of the highly protectionist trade and foreign investment policies, our FDI remained controlled. When you are writing why industrial growth could not take place in the desired manner, you can write because we gave overrole to the public sector. Because of the employment requirement, we had the labor intensive product reserved for the SSI and they could not grow. There were strict investment ceiling, and because of these controls, the private sector could not grow. When they are asking why the industry could not grow, again you can mention these three factors, that is the labor, land and the credit. Then when the examiner asks why the agriculture sector has not been grown so much, so you can mention all these points. So this is the analysis given by the Niti Aayog. So don't miss this analysis. You can write this analysis in your essay, in your general studies paper 2, in your interview, and the general studies paper 3. Now, next thing we will discuss is the problems with the planning system or planning commission basically. So planning commission was the instrumental in carrying the planning system in India. And this planning commission, this was operating as per the executive order. There was no legislative backup. And it was actually making the plan. It was not only making the plan, it was also making the centrally sponsored schemes which were to be implemented by the state government, and it was not involving the state government. So there was a over centralization, that all the schemes were framed by the planning commission without the involvement of the state government, and state government were supposed to implement these schemes without their voice being heard at the central level. So planning commission was actually supposed to be an advisory body, but it actually became an executive body. So this resulted into the politicization. The ruling party in the center would give more preference to the states which are ruled by the same political party. Otherwise, if it is ruled by the opposition political party, it will not give sufficient funds to that party. So there was a politicization. Then because it had the allotment of funds power, there was the problem that this body actually diverted its attention from the research and development to the execution part. So we had already so many executive agency in the form of ministries, but still this body was actually acting as an overriding body over all the other bodies. So first problem was the over centralization of authority, and there was no legislative backup. Still, just because it was the even if it was the executive body, the planning commission was having over centralization. It was politicized, and the power to allocate funds actually resulted into the discrimination with the state government, that it will give more funds to the states which are ruled by the same party as in the center and not otherwise. The transparency was very, very poor. How the funding is done, how the different decisions are taken is actually not discussed in detail. There is no well-defined parameter. The accountability is also not fixed because it is not a legislative body. It is just an executive body. There is no legislative mechanism to hold this body accountable in the parliament. So this was also one of the problem. This followed the top-down model. The people sitting in the air-conditioned office, they will decide what the farmer is supposed to do, how the state government are going to implement the schemes. They didn't take the advice of the Gram Panchayat, state government, district officials. So this top-down model actually resulted into the gap between the beneficiaries and the schemes. So the intended objectives of the schemes were not achieved. So it resulted into the top-down model and the gap between the beneficiaries and schemes. The states were not involved, and this policy was working only in the execution domain. It was not involved in the improvement in the governance. It involved the generalistic people. There was no expertise people. Today is the era of 21st century. Everything needs expertise. That is why the Niti Aayog has been, has replaced the planning commission. Niti Aayog has the expert people. Even the government is recruiting the people at the joint secretary level from the respective expert, the respective expert from the private sector. So this generalistic personnel actually did not have the sufficient expertise to deal with the relevant issues. So these problems were there with the planning commission. Now we will see what are the issues in the Indian planning system. So I will give you 15 seconds and think what are the issues in the Indian planning system. So we have discussed the mistake in the Indian planning. We have discussed the problem with the planning commission as an organization, and this is the issues in the Indian planning system. When I say issues means those points on which there is a controversy, those points on which there is a debate, those points which are yet to be settled, right? So this is what I mean by the issues. So just think about those points where the controversy still lies in the Indian planning system, right? So take 15 seconds and write down. Okay, so now the issues in the Indian planning system. The first issue is the public versus the private sector role. What should be the role of public sector? What should be the role of private sector? When we gave the important role to the public sector in the 1950, it was required at that point of time. But in 1991, it became evident that we can't give much role to the public sector. And now when we are giving more role to the private sector, then private sector is involved into the corruption. There are various corruption issues, like in the Satyam, like in the ICICI, like in the Tatas, like in the other organizations. The private builders, they are squandering the money of the common people. So is the private sector ethical? Is the public sector not free from is the public sector free from corruption? All those issues and everything else. So this is a debate which is not settled. We have to give the role both to the public and the private sector. So this topic we will discuss as a separate topic, and we will discuss that what is the good thing of public sector, what are the important points of private sector, and what should be the way out, so that we can have the benefit of both the public and the private sector. Second thing is, should we focus on the agriculture sector? Should we focus on the industrial sector? So this debate you can find in your NCERT of politics in 12th class. So there is an NCERT, India since independence, of 12th class. In that NCERT, this debate has been given in detail, and this debate is very simple. That India is a agrarian country. We have huge fertile land. So we should focus upon the agriculture. If we have good agriculture, then it can feed to the industry also. It can be a base for the exports also, and it can provide the good livelihood to the people who are living in the rural area. So this is a logic why industry should be there, agriculture should be there. Why industry should be there? This is also a good question, because see, why should industry be there? Industrial productivity is always more than the agriculture productivity. Economic Survey 2018 also said this thing very carefully. Economic Survey 2018. This Economic Survey 2018 said that even though we should have good share of the agriculture, in the absolute term, agriculture should grow. In absolute term, the food production should grow. In absolute term, the income of the farmer should grow. But in proportionate term, the share of agriculture sector in overall GDP should come down. This is the symbol of a developed country. In the developed country, you will find that overall the agriculture sector is very vibrant, but at the same time, the share of agriculture sector in the overall GDP is very, very low. So this is the point that we should focus, and that is why the government is focusing upon the industry sector, that we have now focus on the make in India, that we can grow better industrial growth. At the same time, we are also focusing upon the agriculture sector through various schemes like Pradhan Mantri Sichai Yojana, Fasal Bima Yojana, and so many schemes, right? So this debate is again very, very important. Next debate is subsidies versus investment debate. So as we discussed that in the fourth five-year plan, almost 50% of the people was under the poverty line. Even today, almost 22% people are under the poverty line. So at this point of time, shouldn't we give them subsidy? Shouldn't we give them free food? Shouldn't we give them, some kind of unemployment allowance? Or that money should be invested into the skill development, education, health, infrastructure, roads, or improving the productivity of the agriculture sector, industrial sector. So which thing is better? That is also a debate that is yet to be settled. So this subsidies versus investment debate is yet to be settled. And as I told you in the previous slide, that in the agriculture sector, the investment is 20% only and the subsidy portion is 80%. So this is not a good sign. This shows that in the long term, we can't actually improve the agriculture productivity. If we can't improve the agriculture productivity, how we can ensure the doubling of farmer income in the long term? Right? So this subsidy versus investment is also one of the very important debate. Then this is also very, very important debate, which we will also discuss as a separate topic. The growth versus development debate. This growth versus development debate is very, very misunderstood debate. So first of all, if we see in the Indian scenario, in the first five-year plan only, we started focusing upon the growth. As I told you, that if we want to improve the people from their poverty, then first we should have the resources. That is why first we focused upon the growth. In the second five-year plan, we focused upon the trickle-down growth model. Then in the fourth five-year plan, again, we focused upon the growth with stability. In the sixth five-year plan, we came with a direct attack on the poverty. Then, for the first time in the 10th five-year plan, we said that now we are focusing upon the development. When the Millennium Development Goals were laid down by the United Nations in the year 2000, then after we said that now we will focus upon the development. So our focus on the growth has been more than the development, which is not a good thing, because we are focusing only upon the economy, only upon the GDP growth, not upon how it will be redistributed. But the good thing is that now we are focusing upon the development also. The theme of 12th five-year plan, you may remember, it is faster, more sustainable and more inclusive growth. So faster growth is basically focusing upon the growth only, sustainable and inclusive. When these three are combined, then it means now we are focusing upon the overall development, so that these resources which are accumulated from the growth is actually converted into the good human development indicators, right? Next is the plan versus non-plan expenditure issue. So now this plan versus non-plan differentiation has been eliminated, but still this debate was there for a long time. So planning expenditure means the expenditure which is planned for a particular scheme, the government scheme, central sponsored scheme. And non-plan expenditure means the expenditure on the subsidy, expenditure on the interest, defense expenditure and day-to-day administration work. So this non-plan expenditure was actually more than the plan expenditure. And this actually was the point of discussion, that this non-plan expenditure, which is actually unproductive, when it remains more than plan expenditure, then in the long term we are heading toward a disaster. But now we have replaced this plan versus non-plan distinction by the capital versus revenue distinction that we can discuss in the fiscal sector. Then non-growth tenets of planning system were ignored. So you may remember that there are 4 tenets of the planning system. One is, do you remember the tenets of the planning system? So one tenet is the growth, another tenet is the equity, another is the modernization, and last one is the self-reliance. So we focused more upon the growth and less upon the modernization, less upon the equity and the self-reliance. So this imbalance was there. Then poverty line controversy. How many people we have poor in India? We are not yet sure about that. Over a period of time, different expert group have been constituted by the Indian planning system, but still some people are saying this is more than 30%, some people are saying this is 20%. We don't know actually how much poverty we have in India. So this controversy also indicates this is a ongoing issue. Data is very big issue. In the recent time only we can see some people are saying growth rate is this much, some people are saying this growth rate is this much. Backstreet data, which was introduced in 2018, created a controversy. The data of the previous government was not adequate. Last week only, one of the very prominent persons said that the GDP growth rate of last couple of years was actually less than what it was indicated. The CSO and NSSO, they are not reliable. The NGOs, the state government, local government, this CSO, NSSO, central government, planning commission, all have their own set of figures. How much is the poverty, how much is the health indicator, how much is the literacy rate. So this data, unless this data issue is settled, we can't actually do nothing more about how to bring the social reforms or political reform of the economic reforms. So these issues are very, very important, and these issues need to be resolved, and definitely there is no end to these issues. Over a period of time, these issues will get resolved with the due delegation, learnings in the process. And last is, this planning system has actually been abolished because of the socialistic systems have been demolished all over the world. And this planning commission, actually this concept of planning commission came from the socialistic system only. So now why the planning commission is going on, and because of this point only the Niti Aayog is introduced in India, right? Now we will discuss the adverse implications of the poor planning system, that how this poor planning or the various issues or the mistakes are actually impacting the economy. So we will discuss this thing. So first of all, we have the poor human development indicators. We could not achieve more than half of the millennium development goals regarding the poverty, food security, health indicators, and standard of living. Our human development indicators are very, very poor. There is high malnutrition, high pollution. The people are suffering from communicable and non-communicable diseases. So even after the independence of more than 75 years, more than 70 years, we are struggling with the basic human development indicators. This planning commission has been given preference to certain states and ignoring other states. So there is a confrontational federalism. And even in the time of Niti Aayog also, we can say certain states like West Bengal, they are not participating in the Niti Aayog meetings. They have their own reservations. So this planning system has failed to bring the states together. It has failed to bring the cooperative and fiscal federalism. It has resulted into the confrontational federalism. The basic issues like data, poverty, they are not yet settled. So these are the adverse implications of the poor planning, and many more that we have already seen, that poor industrial growth, ignorance of the agriculture sector, that we can also mention agriculture sector and the industry. So because of all this, we introduced the Niti Aayog from 1st of January 2015. So this is based upon the Bharatiya governance model. The Niti Aayog is a think tank. This is a think tank. This is actually working at the R&D team. It is also focusing upon the cooperative and fiscal federalism, that states are involved. There is a governing council, and this governing council is having states as its important ingredient. It is having the bottom-up approach, that it will accumulate all the information from the Gram Panchayat level to the state level to the central level, and accordingly it will frame the plans. Analyze quarterly state meeting is there, so the meetings are happening every quarter. Innovation, it is focusing upon. For the innovation, it has introduced various schemes like AIM, Atal Innovation Mission, SETU, and so on. Interdepartmental coordination is also being done by the Niti Aayog, and there are so many things which are being done in a very good manner by the Niti Aayog. So Niti Aayog is actually moving from the planning to the policy. It is no longer a planning body. It is a policy making body, think tank, innovative body. Now we have a question which appeared in 2018. How are the principles followed by the Niti Aayog different from those followed by the erstwhile Planning Commission in India? So this is asking what are the different principles, how the principles are different between the Niti Aayog and the erstwhile Planning Commission in India. So please take 15 seconds and write down the differences, whatever you know, and then we will discuss this topic in a detailed manner. Niti Aayog versus the Planning Commission. Okay, so now let us discuss the Niti Aayog versus Planning Commission, the major principles and the difference between the two.